They might well be asleep at their leadership wheel. You can sort of give them a gentle couple of shakes and just see if they wake up, or you can throw a bucket of water in their face. G'day there, fellow humans. Mark LeBusque here for another episode of the In the Raw podcast, where I grab a couple of questions from you good listeners and do my very, very best to answer them unfiltered, unprepared, and just with what I've got on my mind at the time. And there's a lot going on in my mind. To all of those who provide me with the feedback, and for those that are giving me the questions, I say thank you. Keep them coming, and I'll keep rolling out what I do. Well, today is a bit of boss bashing, I'm going to say, a bit of kicking the old boss in the guts. And look, I'm actually seeing quite a few questions coming through, listeners, about, my boss is this, my boss is bad, my boss is causing these problems. What am I going to do about it? Well, I think the first thing you got to remember is the boss is also a human being. Now, except for the narcissistic ones, even though they're still human, they're pretty close to not being human. So let's not give them a free pass here. But I just think there's too much of this it's their fault going on at the moment. So I'm going to delve into two questions that I've been given today to answer. And you may not be getting the answers you're looking for here, folks, but I'll do my very best to make sure that I get you front and centre in the picture here as well, because I think you have a role to play. So here we go. First question is from Adrian. And Adrian's question is, how do you build cultural change in the workplace when the leader/boss is the one causing the problems? Interestingly, wonder which way the mirror's facing there. Behaviours like they're moody every day, they refuse to take on feedback, irrational in their decision-making, they target staff by being cliquey with others. So all of those behaviours sound pretty bad. So, how do you build cultural change in the workplace when the leader and the boss is causing the problems? Well, I guess the first question I want to ask you, Adrian, is what's the change you're looking for? And I see some behaviours you put here, but before you turn the mirror on the boss, you got to think about what is it that you actually want here? What would better, if there's such a thing, look like? And what do you think the first steps are towards getting to better? The other question that comes to mind from me here is, I think there's a need for some interrogation of reality. And the reality might be just this, Adrian, is what might you and others be protecting by keeping things the way they are? Now, this is a question I've asked a lot recently to my clients when they've come up with some sort of wicked problem, usually something to do with someone's behaviour, the culture, leadership, a whole lot of things like that. And I asked them a question, which is, what are you protecting? The answer that they don't want to share with me, but I think the answer that's on the tip of all their tongues is, maybe we're protecting the ability for us to bitch, whinge and moan about someone or something or whatever it may be. So I think the starting point on this one is, what's good look like? But then have a good look at yourself and say to yourself, what is it that I'm looking to protect here? And it could be a whole lot of things, but I think the big one is the one I've said, is the ability to bitch, whinge and moan, as a couple of my dogs start to misbehave in the background there. I think something else you've got to think about here too, Adrian, is that everybody has a part in the problem. And maybe a starting point for you is to sit down with some of your colleagues. I'll make some assumptions you haven't done this, but to sit down with some of your colleagues and say, well, what is our part in the problem? What are we contributing here to have ourselves in a situation where we feel like the culture is inadequate, the culture is toxic, and why is it that we can seem to think to blame that on one person? So maybe you don't all own all of the problem, but you've all got a little part in the problem, and you should put that on the table, have a conversation, and then start to think about, it's very easy to pot the boss or the manager. It's very easy to look outwards, but what are you doing to look inwards? And I think that's the place you've got to start. Now, the question around how do you build cultural change in the workplace, I think you've got to make others aware that you think there's a problem, and you've got to be able to provide them with some feedback to help them to understand that perhaps they've got a part in the problem as well. Because I'm not defending the boss here. I'm just giving them a bit of an opportunity to not be just tarred with the brush that it's all them and it's all their fault. It's very easy for us all to jump into our bad news filing cabinet in our head, Adrian, and blame others. But give them the chance to respond to some of your questions. I try and keep them as unemotional as you can. I do read a bit of emotion into the question that you've asked me, and I appreciate that. I bet there is some in there as well, but in a very logical way, in a well-intended way, the way to start to change this is to, first of all, get a sense of what you want it to be like, get a sense of your part in the mess, get a sense of your group's part in the mess, and then have the courage to go and have a conversation with the boss or the leader about some of the observations that you're making and perhaps how that's making you feel and others feel in the team. Because if you're not prepared to do that, I actually think you just have to put up with what you got. Bosses are human beings, and they have feelings, they have emotions, they have shit going on in their lives. They have fears. Maybe that's the way they were taught to manage and lead, because that's what got them to where they are today. And they might be fearful that they will actually lose some of that if they start to change. But I think with some honest feedback and some reassurance, you might be able to help that person to shift their behaviour. And then I'm going to say, very much as a collective, you can absolutely start to change the culture, or the culturing, as Michael Henderson calls it, for the better, and not to have it like it is today. So there you go. Maybe, probably, shoulda, woulda, coulda. Maybe not the answer that you were looking for. But, as I said, there's some boss bashing going on here today. There's a lot of boss bashing going on. And we've got to remember that these people are human beings as well. So there's the first one. The second one. Now, I think there's a bit more boss bashing going on here as well. Carla, the question that is asked. My question is, there's a huge amount of ego and therefore game playing in leadership. For me, it shows up as consistent mediocrity in leadership. So what are your thoughts on that? And how do we wake leaders up and stop them being scared to be unpopular with the way things are done? Now, I've only got 15 minutes for both questions here, Carla, so I'm going to give this one my very best shot. So I want to break it down a little bit here. Ego. I talked about this a few weeks ago. Ego is important because it helps us to step into our courage, to take some risks, to try some things that make us uncomfortable. We need to have some of that ego. So let's making sure that we don't always tarnish or tar ego with the same brush. Is there some value in it when it's well intended? Game playing. So I just want to say with this, we grew up learning how to play games. We all did. And I think game playing is something that helps us to learn. It helps us to socialize. It helps us to connect. It helps us to become competitive, because I think being competitive, again, with good intention, is a good thing. So my sense is the sorts of game playing that you're talking about here could be on the other side of well-intentioned. You haven't sort of given any examples here, but, the sort of game playing I'm going to think might be things like excluding people from important information, withholding information because information is power. It could be singling people out in a meeting, ambushing people in a meeting. It could be a whole lot of different things that I've seen along the way. So if those things are going on, we've got to try again to give people some feedback. If you believe that the intention of the game playing is not good, well, then I think, as I said before, feedback, and feedback, because maybe they just can't see it. Maybe they think that's the way the world is because that's the way things have been done, as you said here. This idea of them being scared to be unpopular. Well, this is interesting. Unpopular with who? Is it unpopular with their boss? Is it unpopular with the system? Is it unpopular with changing things so that some people are going to be a bit pissed off. And the other word there being scared, and as you know, I'm a big believer in this, Carla, is that this person or these people are not necessarily resistant to change, but they are very, very fearful of some sort of loss. So it would be interesting to just do some more observation here and try and get a sense of what do you think they're scared of? Because I'm not sure that they're scared of being unpopular. Now, just in regards to that, I think the sort of person that you're describing here usually would be unpopular with the masses. I wonder whether they'd be unpopular with the system. I don't know. Because the way they're doing things is the way things have always been done. But understanding here that your assumption or your perspective on what mediocrity is and what they believe mediocrity is could be very, very different as well. And the only way to start to find some of this stuff out and to wake them up, and this is a really important term because they might well be asleep at their leadership wheel, is the only way to wake someone up is there's a couple of ways. You can sort of give them a gentle couple of shakes and just see if they wake up, or you can throw a bucket of water in their face and that'll get a bit of a different response. So I'm going to suggest here the way to wake them up is to just gently nudge them, sort of see them start to open their eyes up and gently nudge them again. And they sort of, have a bit of a stretch and a bit of a yawn and they start to focus in on what's going on and gently nudge them again, just gently and gently and gently nudge them so that they can start to see what's going on. It's, what it's like when you slowly wake up to what's going on. It's going to be a bit better than if someone throws a bucket of water metaphorically in their face straight away, shocks the hell out of them and gets them to start to become a little bit angry with what's happened. Because if you go about this in a way that creates disequilibrium and a bit of anger, I think you might find that they'll double down on the behaviours that you're saying. So again, maybe not the answer you want to hear, but I think you need to be thinking as well that it could well be like the last one. It's, what are you protecting? It might be nice that you can bitch and moan and whinge about the boss because that's the easy option. But for you to step into your leadership and demonstrate that leadership, I actually think it's going to be less about being able to bitch, whinge and moan and more about having some honest, courageous, and let's say as emotionless as you can and more logical conversations with this person to help them out. I know you're a helpful human. I know you well. So think about it. Think about if you were that person, the gentle wake up or the bucket of water in the face. That's your option. So there you go, folks. It's the boss bashing episode. Be really conscious, you that are listening to this. You might have just been in a boss bashing conversation with one of your peers, and it might just be because it's great for you to be able to continue to see them as the problem, because that means you don't have to hold the mirror up to yourself. So I suggest you get your mirror, you hold it up to yourself, you look at what your contribution is to this, and maybe you can find a better way to build that culture, Adrian, and also to reduce that mediocrity in leadership, Carla. There's the episode for the fortnight. I hope you're still enjoying them. If you love this one, give us a 5-star rating. Leave us a little comment as to why you loved it. Leave me a question as well. I've got a few questions along the way. If you liked it, share it with your friends. If you are if you're a boss basher, you mightn't like it too much, but if you know others that are boss bashers, share it with them and get people to have a bit of a look at themselves. But until next time, let's keep it as raw as we can, as unfiltered, as unplanned, and just say what we think. Bye for now.